Salutations, respective viewers. I am George from Ireland. So this video is about Bojo's Brexit deal. So Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, came back the other day with a deal from Brussels, the European Union, offering the United Kingdom an agreement as the UK departs the EU, and it's to settle trade and various other issues. So that's that. Anyway, Boris Johnson became Prime Minister only 3 months ago, and he said there's only a 1 in a million chance that he would not secure an agreement with the European Union. Hello there, good evening, Diane Malloy. But a lot of people scoffed at that. I thought it was unlikely. He has secured such a deal, so I have to eat my words. Anyway, remember Theresa May's agreement. It was December 2018. She came back with her agreement from the EU, and thrice she put it to Parliament, and thrice it was rejected. The first time by a huge number, over three figures. The first two times it was put to the House of Commons, Boris Johnson voted against. The last time he voted for, even though the content was exactly the same. Theresa May thought she could talk people around, twist people's arms, the situation would pressurise them, don't want to leave without an agreement, and the public anger is rising. But anyway, she gallantly fought the losing battle. So some people thought it was a forlorn hope that Bojo would secure this deal. It's about 95% the same as Theresa May's deal. Remember, the European Union initially said, we're finished the negotiations, no further concessions. But they did think again, and they've tweaked it. So there have been some cosmetic concessions. And one of the sticking points is Northern Ireland's place in the single market, concessions on this issue, regulatory alignment, that it wouldn't be there permanently, because under the old dispensation, Northern Ireland would only be allowed out of these arrangements by mutual consent of the European Union and the UK. And people say, oh, well, the European Union would never agree to that, so it would never change, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so Northern Ireland shall stay in the single market, at least temporarily, be reviewed every 4 years by the Northern Ireland Assembly. If the Northern Ireland Assembly rejects the situation in 4 years, I don't know what happens then, but I suppose we'll jump off that bridge when we come to it. Either just not be part of these EU arrangements, and then the trouble is people want to avoid a hard border in Ireland, which is to say stopping people and physical checks on people, goods going back and forth across the frontier. Now, apparently that happens occasionally anyway. I don't know much about it. Because I used to happen a lot in the Troubles, but that was for different reasons. It wasn't really because your product doesn't conform to our regulations. So the sort of guns, bombs, and wanted criminals that were not going back and forth. The Democratic Unionist Party, that's a major party in Northern Ireland, they're dissatisfied with this agreement, and they say they're going to vote against, because they say it's treating Northern Ireland differently from the rest of the UK. Now, for a century, Northern Ireland has usually been treated differently from the rest of the UK because of its different situation. So they're going to vote against. They've got 10 MPs. Remember, their confidence and supply agreement with the Conservative Party has been crucial to the Conservative Party staying in office. Theresa May thrashed out this deal with them in 2017 after she just squeaked home in that general election. Now, the Conservative Party in the House of Commons has got a minority of 45. And Boris Johnson, he lost, I think it was his first 8 votes as Prime Minister, which is unprecedented. He withdrew the whip from, I think it's 23 Conservative MPs for voting against him, which is something which he said was an issue of confidence. As in, if you don't vote, if we lose this, well, the government will fall. Turn out to be a big fat lie. And he knew that, but he was trying to raise the stakes to force him to vote his way, or at least abstain. So how is it if 23 leave you, you have a minority of 45? Remember, it's double effect. So it's -1 from the government and +1 to the opposition. The net effect is 2, not 1. So Boris Johnson is putting something which has got largely cosmetic changes from Theresa May's agreement, which was so decisively rejected for the first time 10 months ago. So he needs some people to change their minds. People voted for the last one to vote for this one. Now, the ultra-leavers within his own party, that might be only a dozen, will vote against this. Remember, Jacob Rees-Mogg was unhappy with Theresa May's agreement first time. He eventually came around to it saying, well, we do at least leave the European Union, and if we don't go for this, the risk is that we don't have Brexit at all. If you try and put this argument to the Remainers, you have to say you better vote for Boris Johnson's compromise, because otherwise the risk is you leave the European Union without an agreement at all, which is something you are sworn to avoid at all hazards. But anyway, so even those Conservative MPs who remain, is it 310 thereabouts? At least 10 of them won't vote for it for that reason, but maybe a handful won't vote for it because they're extreme Remainers. Really, the extreme Remainers of the Conservative Party, those are the 23 who had the whip withdrawn last month. So Boris Johnson, he's pinning his hopes on Labour leavers voting for this. But the Labour parties, is it 270 MPs, thereabouts? The leavers are not many, around a dozen. Even if they all vote for this, there's nowhere near enough to make up the shortfall Boris is suffering within his own party. The SDLP will vote for this agreement. There's only 7 of them. Sinn Féin don't take their seats because that would involve an oath of allegiance to Her Britannic Majesty. I thought they might move with the times, get with the programme, but no, they're being rigidly ideological. I don't think too many of their supporters would actually be upset about it these days. They'd say it's expedient to vote for this. They vowed they'd never accept a partitionist legislature in Northern Ireland. They did so, loads of things like that. So almost every Labour MP will vote against this agreement. And the SNP, I think every single last one of them will vote against it. The Lib Dems will be against it to a man. I know their leader's a woman, but it's just an expression. And the Liberal Democrats, they are, is it a baker's dozen of MPs now? Since Louise Ellman, that Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside, she defected to them. So fascinating, the Lib Dems have got an MP on Merseyside for the first time since the early 80s, since Jones the vote. So it looks like this is going to be defeated, by quite some margin, by 40 votes, maybe more. But anyway, I could be wrong. I think the chance of this passing is about 30%. Remember, Parliament has been recalled to meet on Saturday, which hasn't occurred since the Falklands conflict of 1982. That's how serious it's been taken. That the House of Commons won the vote to do that, which Boris Johnson didn't want. So he's lost so many things. His authority has been steadily eroded, including by the Supreme Court. I'm not saying they took a political decision. I disagree with the Supreme Court's decision to say the proroguing Parliament is illegal because your advice to Her Majesty the Queen was bogus. But of course, the Supreme Court knows vastly more about law than I ever shall. And people say, oh, they're prejudiced. Well, are they? They might do. What are their opinions on Brexit? I don't know, but I can easily guess. Highly educated people who live in London, or have been working in that profession, are they likely to be Remainers? I think it is likely they're Remainers. The 12 of them, maybe not all 12 of them, but even so, that doesn't prove that they made that decision because they are Remainers. They could have put that aside and made it on a judicial basis. I can't remember, as Lord Hoffman saying, I approach this as a judge. Somebody's got to make the decision, and people have opinions, especially very brainy and well-informed people tend to consider these matters and have viewpoints, although the cleverest people, and those who are best clued up, tend not to be too categorical about it. It's like Bertrand Russell saying that the wisest people are so uncertain about these things, they have a nuanced position, is the fools and fanatics are always so certain, because it's so straightforward for them and they know so little, and they can't acknowledge things that they find unpalatable. So those people are going to vote no to this in the House of Commons. Do they have a back channel to the European Union? I mean, I very much suspect so. I could be wrong, because they would try and keep it quiet, saying vote no, and then seek an extension 19th of October. Well, that is coming up. That's tomorrow. That's Saturday. And on that basis, the European Union will say yes, the United Kingdom will be allowed to stay in the EU for goodness knows how long. Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, said in a further 2 years, so bring us up to October 2021, not too long before the UK's next Westminster election is due in May 2022. Ample time for an early election to be called, because remember this Fixed Term Parliaments Act passed under David Cameron in 2010. If you have a vote of no confidence, if no government emerges within 2 weeks, you have an election, or indeed Parliament, if votes for by a two-thirds majority, can have an early election. Until 2010, it was really by prime ministerial fiat. He or she could advise the monarch to dissolve Parliament, call an early election, and the monarch always went along with that. You're trying to concentrate. Wine and politics are tricky for me. Well, which do you prefer? They go together well. I can't remember who said it. Perhaps it was George Bernard Shaw saying, "Alcohol allows Parliament to achieve things at midnight that most people wouldn't attempt at midday," something of that nature, because sometimes they're in a crapulous state. Parliament is also called the Palace of Westminster. It is a royal palace. No member of the royal family has resided there for centuries. So it was exempt from sort of alcohol taxes and licensing laws, as in they could serve alcohol after hours and so forth. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer delivering his budget, sometimes they would have whiskey in one hand to wet his whistle, like Norman Lamont, or Norman Lamont if you prefer, in the early 90s was doing that. Where was I? So getting an extension of the European Union, plenty of time for a new election or a new referendum or whatever. All sorts of things could happen to make the European Union more palatable, and prevent Brexit altogether, which of course is what many of the Remainers want. They're Remainers who went along with the will of the people. Theresa May would be an example. Dominic Raab would be an example, saying, I wanted to stay in the European Union. We lost the vote, we lost the argument. I accept that, and I will do what the majority of people want, because that's democratic. The whole purpose of the referendum was for Parliament to take orders from the people. And remember, the people are our masters and not our servants. That's a quotation from Michael Collins. Anyway, one of my least favourite people, but I think on this one he was on the money. But what if these Remainers in the British Parliament don't have some tacit agreement with the European Union? Then this is a gamble, and the stakes are very high for them. Because supposing they vote against this deal, which has been proffered by Brussels and Strasbourg, and then the default position is leaving the European Union on the 31st of October. If one member state refuses the UK an extension, that's it. Of the other 27 member states, all 27 must agree for the United Kingdom to remain in the European Union. So what most Remainers want now is if not an election to bring a pro-Remain government to office, if not a referendum to try and overturn the result of 3 years ago, they would like to withdraw Article 50. Remember, under Article 50 of the Treaty of Lisbon, any member state was entitled to inform the European Union of its intention to withdraw, and that would trigger the 2-year exit process. Obviously, the UK's 2-year exit process expired in March, but it's been extended twice. There's talk of a third extension. I agreed to the first 2 extensions. I really wanted a deal. But then, by now, I think the United Kingdom should just leave without a deal. Otherwise, Brexit's not going to happen, as I've come to believe it won't happen at all anyway. But it really is now or never. So, again, there's a palpable lack of panic. 2 weeks to go, preparations have been made. There have been stress tests. Business has been informed what they need to do. The UK's got contingency plans if they need to park lots of lorries here and there. Already scare stories in the media about running out of medicines and stuff like that. I think people have got bored of Project Fear, and Project Fear, they're kind of giving up, largely failed. But yeah, as I say, if this Remainer plot went wrong, they'd be really left with egg in their face. The United Kingdom would leave the European Union, and without an agreement, something that Remainers really wanted to avoid, and they would have brought it about. There was a chance to leave smoothly, with an easy transition, with the worst avoided, and they would have passed it up. Okay, so they would play for very high stakes. They would give away something reasonable for more and end up with nothing. So they would have brought about a cataclysm from their own point of view. Hello, the Brino doesn't pass. Hungary veto extension, clean Brexit. What is Brino? British? I don't know what that stands for. Why do you think Hungary would veto it? Because Viktor Orban is like that. He's quite Eurosceptic, so there's a strong degree of Euroscepticism in Denmark. Remember, in 1992, they voted no to the Maastricht Treaty. They made to vote against. Again, the Brexit Party, one of their MEPs is Henry Overgaard Nielsen. Brexit in name only. Right, yeah. So, I mean, that's the argument. It's not a proper Brexit, and I somewhat feel like that. On the other hand, it could be renegotiated over the years. It's still a step forward, because it's often, well, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said, half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. And Politics is the art of the possible. That's what Lord Butler said. Yeah, so Bojo has staked his authority on this. He's invested a lot of political capital in this, vowing it will happen on the 31st of October, over-promising, like his soulmate across the Atlantic, Donald Trump. Now, it wasn't something that was impossible to achieve, but the likelihood was low. This was a do-or-die mission, in Boris Johnson's own words. And if he fails to achieve this, then ratings will fall. He'll lose the public trust even more. I know he's a charlatan. Anyway, so what would happen then? There might be the vote of no confidence. There was talk of it happening next week, but actually the opposition parties didn't try it. That would be a propitious moment. Some of his own party would have lost faith in him. So Brexit would be prevented, well, sorry, at least delayed by several months, 2 years, maybe forever. I think Brexit is not going to happen. So because I don't think the Commons will vote for this deal, and that's that. But Viktor Orban, his arm would be twisted by the other EU member states to allow an extension. But what's in it for him? What's in it for Viktor Orban in aggravating the other EU member states? I know he's quite unpopular with them because of his hardline chauvinistic nationalism, not playing ball on illegal immigration and so on, sucking up to Putin. But I don't perceive any gain in it. He really cares about domestic politics. Anyway, so a no confidence vote could be moved. Now, obviously, every Labour MP, every Liberal Dem MP would vote against the government. How about the DUP? Now, that is a difficult one to call because they're very disappointed with Theresa May and Boris Johnson. The Conservative Party had this agreement with them that Northern Ireland would be treated no differently from the major portion of the United Kingdom. That they said you've reneged on that. On the other hand, they don't want to put Corbyn in office, who was pro-IRA, and that weakened their position. And they think even the other parties might take revenge on them for having supported the Tories. So I can't really guess where they're going to go, perhaps abstain. But how about those 23 Conservative MPs who had the whip withdrawn? Which way would they go? I think most of them would vote for the government. I think a few of them would not. Ken Clarke, let's talk about making him interim Prime Minister. Obviously, there is no such title as interim Prime Minister. You're either First Lord of the Treasury or you're not. Incidentally, First Lord of the Treasury is, of course, one of the titles of the Prime Minister. On number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's official residence, it does say First Lord of the Treasury. It doesn't say Prime Minister. So he would do that. He's an arch Europhile, made up his mind in the 50s, never reconsidered. He's almost 80 years of age, father of the house, and then the longest continuously serving male MP. So, no confidence vote. You could try and cobble together a government. Labour with the Lib Dems, with the SNP, might be confidence and supply from those. The price might be not having Corbyn as Prime Minister. He's facing constant carping from his own party. How many Labour MPs have resigned from the party? Over 10 in the last few months. Nothing like that's happened in Labour since 1981, since the Social Democratic Party was formed and 23 Labour MPs left. But other thing about him is, he's doing not that badly. Labour only 5% behind in the polls, but next week they could be ahead in the polls, especially if Brexit fails to materialise. And the Brexit Party is standing, and they're under Nigel Farage, former leader of UKIP. Most of the talented leaders from UKIP have gone over to the Brexit Party. There's scarcely room for one Eurosceptic party in the UK system. They can't get into Parliament. There certainly isn't room for two, so UKIP's really a busted flush. The gifted people from UKIP have defected to Brexit. So, and the UKIP and the Brexit Party, because of the first past the post system, they could almost never get anyone into the House of Commons. They had two, ever, max, both Tory MPs who defected and stood in by-elections in their constituencies. But the Brexit Party, they won a few seats at the European elections, and the local elections next May they would stand. If there was a general election, they would stand, again, not win a single constituency. They would cost the Conservatives a few seats in the English Midlands, on the east coast of England. None in Scotland, none in Wales. They probably wouldn't even contest in Northern Ireland. For a reason I don't quite understand, the eastern coast of England is the most Eurosceptic region. Maybe partly is often economically left behind. It's very white. It's very working class. Anyway, so they in northeast England, where Labour's very strong, the Brexit Party is reasonably strong. They wouldn't win, they wouldn't cost Labour seats there because the Labour majorities are so enormous. But as I say, in southern England, they would cost the Conservatives a few. They would claim a few scalps. That just means a Labour MP or a Lib Dem getting in, who's very likely to be Europhile. So we could have some sort of coalition if we don't have an immediate election. And as I say, it's the Conservatives don't even have a majority at the moment, and they wouldn't get one otherwise. Oh, this Parliament versus people, that would actually play into the hands of the Brexit Party, polling about 12% in the polls. The Brexit Party probably won't get actually as much as 12%, even if there was an immediate election, because people that overrate these third parties in these polls, yeah, I'm going to vote for them, but when it really comes down to it, they're more likely to vote for a mainstream party that could actually win. So there we are. Now, Conservatives, even if they got 5 percentage points more than Labour, so much depends on how the cookie crumbles. How is this distributed amongst the constituencies? These things are difficult to predict. Okay, like John Major, when he won actually quite comfortably in 1992, only had a majority of 20. Okay, because his vote was not very efficiently distributed. Or Blair won quite narrowly in 2005, the Labour Party, only about 2.5% ahead of the Conservatives, but had a majority of 50 seats. Hello there from Wisconsin, reality is an illusion. There we are. One thing is, in a Welsh by-election a few months ago, the minor parties, was it the Labour and Plaid Cymru, stood aside to help the Liberal Democrat defeat the pro-Brexit candidate as a Conservative. So if there was a similar arrangement, that would really wreck the Conservatives. I don't think they do that on a nationwide scale. It seemed like too much of a stitch up. But Bojo, you're blaming Parliament. Well, this is like, the sailor who complains about the sea. All right, you're in Parliament. You're supposed to be in charge. Be a bit like a Who Governs Britain thing by Ted Heath. Well, not you, mate. If you even have to ask the question, you shouldn't be Prime Minister. But so not looking terribly good for the Conservative Party. There's talk of making Sir John Bercow Prime Minister temporarily. How temporarily would the so-called interim Prime Minister be? 1 week, 1 year, what? Until what? Until another election? So, I mean, Corbyn is facing constant sniping from within his own party. However, good thing from his perspective is at least his most stalwart critics have mostly left the party, which actually gives him a bit of a better chance of staying on. You've got one shot at winning an election. I think if you don't win an election as a leader of the opposition, you're gone. Okay? As leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, your mission is not simply to provide critical analysis of the government, it's to become Prime Minister. All right? It's easy to criticise, but scrutinising them, that's not enough. Holding them to account, you've got to actually win an election, and he failed to do so. I know it's early, but what are your top 3 Democratic picks for the next US president? Well, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, or Kamala Harris, I should say, or Bernie Sanders. The only thing about Bernie Sanders is he healthy enough? I know he's had health scares, may have to drop out of the race. Buttigieg, I don't think so for various reasons. He could be vice president. But there we are. The thing is, you're spoiled for choice amongst the Democrats. There's so many talented people. My dream ticket a while ago was Sanders-Harris. Joe Biden, there are too many skeletons in his cupboard. Again, he's too old, and he's not different enough from Donald Trump. Might as well stick with the real thing. I know he's not foul like Donald Trump is, but he's too gaffe-prone, slightly losing his marbles. You want to contrast this snarling, raging, malicious moron Trump with someone who's youthful, healthy, vigorous, someone of integrity, someone who's really admirable. And Joe Biden is not different enough from Trump. Stale, male and pale and all the rest of it. But back to British politics. So there could be some sort of coalition between these parties. But and then if Brexit is prevented, the SNP's case, we demand a second referendum, that largely evaporates. The trouble is, support for separation in Scotland is just over 50%. But if Brexit doesn't happen, that would fall considerably. Remember in 2014, 45% of people in Scotland voted to leave the United Kingdom. And then after they lost that, support for that loss fell to like 35%. But shot up because of the possibility of Brexit, especially Brexit without an agreement with the EU. So there we are. If there was a Labour government in office, that's far less offensive to most people in Scotland than the Conservative Party. Although the Tories didn't do very badly in Scotland. Remember the last Westminster election, they got 24% of the vote, which was the best result in decades. Remember 20 years prior to that, the Conservative and Unionist Party lost every single constituency in Scotland. But the Conservatives got a baker's dozens of seats in Scotland. They'll probably lose a few of them next time. The Lib Dems might regain a couple. Labour regains several. The Scottish National Party probably still remain the largest party. The SNP's been in government in Holyrood House, that's a Scottish Parliament, since 2007. So what goes up must come down. They can't defy political gravity forever. And there are some serious problems there in terms of education, healthcare, crime. They can't always blame the English. What do you mean on purpose, Diane? Okay. Private conversation going on in the commentary box between my fans. Yeah, the SNP have got to carry the can for some things going wrong in Scotland. But fortunately, they've been able to take the spotlight off their shortcomings and put it onto the Conservative Party in particular. And, oh, England is so bad. But if Brexit is thwarted permanently, then that argument will no longer wash. Now, I've got to consider the possibility. What if Brexit gets through? What if Boris Johnson gets his way? It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. I give it a 30% chance it'll happen. On Saturday, he somehow manages to twist enough arms, whisper the sweet little nothings into the right ears, and somehow he squeaks through, even by one vote. Then that's it. Then the agreement is accepted. Then Brexit is going ahead on the 31st of October. But even if you're a Remainer, it's not the worst. There is an agreement. And why did the EU agree to this? And the one bit that people seem to have forgotten about, not really talking about, is the United Kingdom's, as it were, divorce settlement, paying of the order of £40 billion to the European Union, a golden handshake for the EU. What's the argument for that? Well, the UK had signed up to a new spending round of the EU budget before the 2016 referendum. Various people in the United Kingdom worked for the EU and had paid towards their pensions and blah, blah, blah. Halloween Brexit, yes, and it really will be fright night for Bojo if he doesn't make this come to pass. Then Boris Johnson would have pulled off a dramatic success against all the odds, and his ratings would shoot up. Like him or not, he would have accomplished something that many people said was impossible. And then the pound would like it, but the pound would jump. The stock market would like it because it's a bit spooked at the moment because people don't know which way to jump. And then finally, we could stop talking about Brexit. I am bored, rigid with it. Are you bored to tears of hearing about Brexit? For over 3 years, we've spoken of little else, and then deal with other issues. The National Health Service is not going well enough. Crime is too high, particularly knife crime. In London, I read 15,000 knife crimes a year, which doesn't mean people being killed. Only 63 people stabbed to death, which is too many. You don't want anyone poignarded to death. Are you for or against Brexit? I'm for Brexit, and I'm for a no deal if this thing doesn't get through. I would reluctantly support the current deal on offer. But mostly it's like threatening people with knives or whatever. So deal with the crime and try and improve the economy. Bojo's ordered this massive spending round, spending money the government doesn't really have, throwing around like confetti. And what about the Middle East? Is the UK going to fight against Iran? I very much hope not. Trying to beef up the military, which is, hardly anyone wants to join the military. They're recruiting more Gurkhas from Nepal. For the very first time, recruiting women into the Gurkhas. Loads of things, improving education, transport. What are we going to do about green energy? The Extinction Rebellion is putting the frighteners on politicians. So there's so many other issues that are not being given sufficient attention, and Parliament can finally start discussing those ones instead of incessantly obsessing over Brexit. That will be that. I suppose the Remainers won't give up hope of coming back in. And indeed, Donald Tusk says it the other day, we'll miss you desperately. If you ever change your mind, the door will be always open. You can come back. And Remainers would try it. If there is another referendum, as I've pointed out previously, Remain would probably win. The opinion polls show Remain on 55%. Okay, I know in 2016, Remain was on 52% in the opinion polls. If you go for the polar polls, in reality, they got 48% when the referendum was actually held, so overrated by 4 percentage points. But supposing that margin of error is the same now, that Remain is overrated by 4 percentage points, 55% in the polls, that in reality they got 51%, they would still win. So and that 4% error, that was meant to be beyond the margin of error, it's unlikely the polls will be that wrong again. Every day, the demographics are shifting towards Remain. The nonagenarians, overwhelmingly leavers, they're dying off. People who've turned 18 in the 3 years since the last referendum, they are now, and they break heavily towards Remain, about 70% Remainers. And there are some penitent leavers who voted Leave last time but have had a change of heart and would now vote Remain. Now they see the deal that's on offer, or supposedly they understood the ructions it's going to cause. So for all these reasons, it's going in that way. Some European Union citizens have been resident in the United Kingdom, subsequently gained citizenship. The great majority of them would vote Remain. Remember, EU citizens who were legally resident in the United Kingdom were not permitted to vote in that referendum in 2016. The complicated situation, EU citizens resident in the UK, they can vote in local elections, as I said, for your county council, city council. They can vote in European elections, I believe. I think they can't vote in Westminster elections. Commonwealth citizens who are legally resident in the UK, they can vote for Westminster elections, not for the other ones. Citizens of the Republic of Ireland can vote in all elections in the UK if they're here. I think America should get rid of the Electoral College and go to a popular vote. But I suppose partly because I think, 2 times out of the last 5, is it? The one who won the popular vote has lost in the Electoral College. Do you believe if Boris loses in a parliament, he should ask for extension as is legally? Well, I think he should, just because you're legally bound to do so. I think you should obey the law. But he seems to have said both yes and no to doing that. Can he legally avoid doing it? I don't know. I think there'd be some sort of court challenge if he failed to do so. Great not to have to siphon through the establishment propaganda. Thank you. You're welcome. How long do you think Bojo will remain First Lord of the Treasury? Well, as I was saying, it all depends on whether he wins this vote tomorrow. If he wins it, then he'll stay on till the next election, which is May 2022. Will he win that election? Now, that may be a fool's errand to predict this far out, but I suspect not. The Conservatives won 3 elections on the trot. They've only once won 4 elections in a row, and there are all sorts of things going wrong. But if he loses it, there will be an attempt to, there'll be a no confidence vote immediately, I would say on Monday. And then, so would he lose that? I think he probably would, because he's on, as a majority of -45. And the DUP probably wouldn't vote for him. I don't think he will rejoin for some time. I wouldn't underestimate the Leave support in the country, which would argue that Evans Gardner support because it's sick to the back teeth of it. Well, as I say, the Leave support is supposed to be about 45% in the UK. Now, about 23% of that are hardcore Leavers, people who would consider voting for the Brexit Party, who would rather leave without an agreement. And for some of them, feel this agreement is a betrayal, that it's not the real Brexit, it's faux Brexit. So, so as I pointed out, I think my side, the Leavers, we would lose were it held again. So there we are. Possibilities of Prime Minister would be, say, John Bercow, Speaker of the House of Commons, who's just standing down as Speaker of the House of Commons. Most expats globally are leavers, ironically, the person said, and not just those in the UK, but British citizens resident in other EU member states, they're mostly Remainers, or even resident in Switzerland. I know Switzerland's not a member of the EU, but Switzerland has this agreement with the EU to be part of their free trade bloc. Switzerland allows EU citizens to reside in Switzerland, and Swiss citizens are allowed to reside, live and work in any EU member state, and so forth. Those are things like pension entitlements. British citizens in Switzerland, getting pensions, getting access to public services there, which wouldn't automatically continue. Okay, that's enough about Brexit. I would really like it to be settled one way or the other. So, we could have a new Prime Minister a week from now. Bercow is a possibility. Ken Clarke is a possibility. They're not talking about Labour politicians these days. Okay, so please support me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, or indeed on Patreon. Thank you very much for those who've been donating. I need that to sustain this channel, otherwise the channel would stop. You're most welcome, reality. Book online lessons with me in history, politics, geography, French, religious studies, English literature, English as a foreign language. You're most welcome, Diane. I do GCSEs, A-levels, International Baccalaureate, interview practice for various universities or job interviews. I'm a tour guide in London, so arrange a guided tour with me. Direct message me. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Facebook. Thank you so much. Over and out.